Welcome to NBA Today. I'm Malika Andrews. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, my friends. That's all that's standing between us right now and opening night of the NBA season. And that number 6, it's also significant to the Boston Celtics. We're going to try to do something the last 6 NBA champions have failed to accomplish, and that is go back to back. NBA champion Richard Jefferson, he knows something about trying to repeat.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Rich. It's so good to have you back.
It's good to be back.
Do you think the Boston Celtics can do it, and if so, why?
100% I think they can do it. One, because they have the youth on their side. Their best players are young, they're healthy, they're ready to go. Now, Porzingis, his health is going to be a big issue. They're not starting the season healthy, but they've got all of their defensive players back. They got all of their offense back. They're young and they're hungry. So, to me, of the last 6 champions, they are probably in the best position to go back to back.
Well, I'll take it one step farther for you, Rich. The Celtics, they are returning their top 11 scorers,
Denver
right?
didn't do that last year.
So that doesn't mean there aren't plenty of new faces, though, or old faces and new places. 82 players. They switched teams this summer, headlined, of course, by Paul George, and then Philadelphia, Klay Thompson going to Dallas. Chiney, I'm pretty happy that you're still on our team here, but who is the player that you're most looking forward to seeing in their new uniform with their new team?
That guy right there,
ding, ding,
Paul
ding.
George.
Oh.
Yeah, Paul George. And I say this because the process was actually coined in 2013, over 10 years ago.
Right.
It's time to deliver Philly on the promise of a championship. And this squad with Paul George, they touch all aspects of basketball. Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Paul George combined for 80 points per game. So yeah, we've got to move away from the process, and now they have to deliver on the promise, and it will largely come through his hands.
It's going to have to be processed, all right? The majority of player movement, it feels like it may be behind us, at least for now, but that doesn't mean there aren't still plenty of questions that remain as we're just a couple weeks away from training camp here. Tim Legler, several players here, they're looking to wrap up their summer without signing extensions. It may mean guys like Julius Randle, Jimmy Butler, Brandon Ingram, just a few that could find themselves on the trade talks if their seasons don't go as planned. So which player do you have your eye on here?
Julius Randle.
Okay.
And it's not because of his talent that this is an audition in some ways. It's because of the fit. What this team has done, the drastic makeover, all of the new pieces. Now we have to find out if 2 ball-dominant players, Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, can play together, coexist with all of the new pieces that they've added. If so, this might represent the biggest challenge to the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference.
My thing is, you look at Minnesota. I always thought Minnesota would not take that leap until they realized that Anthony Edwards was their best player and Cat had to go be the second best. He had to be the second best player. If Julius Randle accepts that role and says, okay, look, I recognize that we're going to play through this dude, we're going to play through Brunson. Let me figure out how to maximize that and maximize our team. Then I think the Knicks are in a great place. But this is the same type of seismic shift from Anthony Edwards to Karl Anthony Towns. It's the same thing going on at the Knicks.
Right, but it's going to be interesting because when Julius Randle got hurt, he was essentially the number 2 option for these New York Knicks. And now they have brought in the full Nova Knicks, right? They have OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson is back. Trying to figure all of that out, Chiney, is going to be a challenge.
Well, we're all players here, and as much as we are playing a team sport, we understand it's important to be humble. The hardest position is watching your team succeed without you. That's very difficult to process, and I do think that he is a huge catalyst for them to move forward, but he's going to have to figure out where he fits in. That's something that he probably never thought or understood, Richard.
Yeah, but when you look at OG Anunoby, he's not a go-get-you-a-bucket guy. You go to Mikal Bridges, he's not a go-get-you-a-bucket guy. They got 2 guys that can create for others and themselves. That's their 2 best players, but one of them is going to have to take a lesser role, and that's what we're going to see if Julius Randle can do.
And the strength for Julius Randle is that he's a hybrid. Even though he's not as tall as the centers, he can really score, he can attack downhill, so I do think he can fill the gaps losing Hartenstein.
We should remind folks he did have surgery on that shoulder in April, so we're assuming that he's good to go here to start the season, but that was really the last time we saw him, what was well before that, Tim.
Yeah, so look, both of you make great points. Here's the thing with Julius Randle. He provides something the Knicks desperately need, right? A bigger guy that can go get his own shot. Because their wings now are mainly going to be mostly spot-up type guys. Obviously, everything revolves around Brunson. So he represents that big wing that can win matchups. He can beat bigger guys off the dribble. He can post up smaller guys. The question for Julius Randle is going to be, can he dial back maybe his usage a little bit and fit into something that looks more relevant in terms of contending? If that's the case, his value will be higher than ever, even though his numbers might take a hit. And that is what I am fascinated to watch once they get all of this together. They never really reached their ceiling. Injuries derailed their ability to do that. I can't wait to see what the Knicks look like at full strength to start the year.
But dialing back, to use your term, in a contract year, how challenging is that?
Well, it depends on what your goal is. Chris Bosh, he had to dial back to win some championships. Kevin Love had to dial back. And you talk about power forwards that were hybrids, but they were playing with other ball-dominant guards. That's what Chris Bosh was. That's what Kevin Love was. So to me, if you're going to have a big and you're saying, hey, if I want to be a part of this, if I want to go and try and win championships, I have to take a lesser role. But every time you're on a great team, lesser roles come with that.
The goal is to get to a conference finals. They haven't been there in 24 years. They haven't been there since 2000. To me, I think this is a huge experiment looking at the New York Knicks, the Nova Knicks, because often we're in the era of analytics, of numbers, of talent, right? They're trying to win with chemistry. And he is a very important cog in that machine.
Right.
Because we already know what the chemistry looked like when those guys played in college. Now when you insert him into the fold, can this band of brothers really win?
Right, because you're looking at the starting lineup. You're looking at Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG, Randall Robinson. But what happens when maybe you want to inject a little bit more shooting and Dante DiVincenzo's in the – is that going to be something that Randall is okay with? Look at this, the Thunder. They have the shortest odds to win the West, and after having the #1 seed last season, remember they added Alex Caruso. We've been asking if they'd add some size, Isaiah Hartenstein to make a push as well. And then you can see OKC followed by the Wolves, the Nuggets, the Mavs, and then the old guard, the Lakers, the Suns, the Warriors. They all have odds outside of the top 4. But I want to focus on the top because the West, undoubtedly, it's going to be difficult to get through here. There have been 5 different teams to represent the West in the finals the last 5 seasons. So, Legs, that being said, do you agree with the odds makers? The Thunder, should they be at the top? Should they have the best odds?
As a #1 seed in the regular season, yes. I think they will end up with the #1 seed again. I just don't think it's as big a priority for the other teams like Minnesota, Dallas, and Denver to get the #1 seed. I think Oklahoma City still feels like that would be very important for them for a postseason run. That doesn't mean I'd make them the favorite to get to the finals and win the Western Conference. I think their core, like those next guys besides Shea, are still a little bit right. I need to get more ripe. That talking about, of course, Williams and Chad Holmgren. Those guys have to now show that they can do this for an extended playoff run. You saw what happened a year ago. They win a first-round playoff series. They weren't really a match for Dallas. Those guys, I think, are maybe a year or 2 away from being exactly what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander needs next to him to make a legitimate run through the Western Conference. So I would still put Dallas, Denver, Minnesota as favorites ahead of Oklahoma City to represent the West for a championship.
I agree with you, Legs. The Thunder do have the young legs in this race. But we got to have a sound for that. But I think the West is wide open. I was saying it's Game of Thrones. It's like it's Westeros, if you're a fan of that, because it's a power struggle, especially with this generational gap.
Right.
You mentioned it. There's KD, there's LeBron, there's Steph, but then there's Luka, there's Ja, there's Zion, there's Ant. The list goes on. And so I think every year we're going to have people coming back. We're going to have people building off of, look at the Dallas Mavs, building off of some of their holes, their issues that got them to the finals. I think the West is wide open.
There's really only 2 teams, right? The Jazz and the Trailblazers that you say.
Why are we even talking about that? Why are we?
Everyone else in the West is love.
No, that's not true.
Gave them their own category.
Yeah, it's like the West and them. No, but really quickly, if we're going to talk about the Thunder, and to Leg's point, they are a regular season team that has to prove what they can do in the postseason, and they're young. We're not saying that they have any failures. It's like Philly. We don't care about Philly until April. That's when they get to decide what they do. For this team, it's going to be about the journey. So would I pick them in a 7-game series over Dallas, over Minnesota, over Denver? Not currently. And one of the reasons where they addressed it was with Hartenstein. They didn't have the bigs. Now it's like, okay, they have some bigs, Chet, they have Hartenstein, but now they don't have big depth. And I'm not being critical of them, but if you're going to go against, the Lakers with Anthony Davis, if you're going against Jokic, if you're going against that front line from Minnesota, like that is a lot to deal with. And even Dallas, they're rolling bigs with the space and shooting. That poses a lot of problems. So you just want them to have a little bit more depth at the big, but they could make it to the finals.
So they only have 4 players, and you see them on your screen right now, that are over 6'6" on this roster, Tim. And I think some folks in the modern NBA would say, okay, but how big of an issue is that actually?
Big one for them. It was
right for them.
Yeah, and it was glaring.
Yeah.
A year ago, like you would watch them some nights, and they were really getting manhandled, like thrown around on the offensive glass, where that's how you finish off defensive possessions. And this was an excellent defensive team in terms of help, rotation, all of those things. But at the end of the day, that ball goes up on the glass. It becomes a grown man's game, and they didn't have enough of that in the paint. So they went out, they addressed that. Alex Caruso, I think, is a great addition, makes him tougher, hard-nosed. He can challenge some of those guards in the Western Conference and wear on them a little bit over the course of the game. But for me, it's always going to get back to, are Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren ready to be that guy for what it's going to take for 3 rounds against the level of competition we're talking about? And I just don't think they're there yet. I love both of them. It's just going to take more time. There's a little bit of a progression that still has to take place for the Thunder.
They're close, though. I'm just going to say, they're close. They're not far off.
You know what's interesting? We may not believe in them, but who do we believe in? And to me, as I'm thinking about that, maybe the best case scenario out of the West to me is Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves, who have the most complete, I guess you can say, offense and defense.
I like that.
He continues to improve. So as much as we knock the Thunder, I think who do we elevate? Maybe they learn from that Dallas series.
John Morant and the Grizzlies, they may have a little something to prove.
Biggest wild card in the league.
I'm fine in the West.
I'm fine in the West. They are
It's a good-looking West.
fine in the West. It is. And the Thunder, I mean, really good defensive signings for them. Getting by Alex Caruso and Lou Dort in crunch time. It's not going to be something fun. But Anthony Edwards, after what we saw in the Olympics, is going to have something to say. And